Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is so good to have you with us today. We are wading into some pretty heavy waters for this one.
Yeah, we really are. It's a big topic.
It is. We are exploring something that is universally human, but incredibly difficult to pin down with we are talking about the end of the world.
Right, both literally and metaphorically.
Exactly. It's kind of a double feature today. We are looking at a stack of sources that analyze Lars von Trier's 2011 film, Melancholia.
But our mission here isn't just to review a movie, right?
No, not at all. We aren't here to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down or talk about the box office. The sources we have in front of us are making a much bigger, much more complex argument.
They're arguing that this film is essentially a simulation.
Yes, a simulation of a very specific, a very difficult state of mind. We are talking about clinical depression.
But I think it's important to clarify for everyone listening that this isn't the depression you read about in a standard medical pamphlet.
Right. We aren't just listing symptoms like fatigue or loss of appetite.
No, we are looking at depression as a fundamental warping of reality.
That is the core thesis we need to unpack today. The source material suggests that science and medicine, for all their incredible advancements, they sometimes come up short when they try to describe the actual texture of mental illness.
Because you can list symptoms all day long, but does a checklist really help you understand what it feels like to have your entire reality dissolve?
Not really. And that's the gap this deep dive is trying to fill. We are going to look at how Melancholia uses cinema.
The camera angles, the editing, the music.
Everything. How it uses narrative structure to articulate feelings that are usually totally invisible to the outside world.
And the central metaphor our sources use right out of the gate is just fascinating. They talk about depression acting like a massive star in space.
Right. It is a gravitational metaphor. It says depression warps everything around it like a star warps space-time.
Which is such a massive concept to start with.
It really is. It's not just that you feel sad. It's that the actual geometry of your existence changes.
It literally changes the physics of your daily life. The source points out that when you are in the grip of this kind of melancholia, your internal sense of duration completely shifts.
Like how time passed.
Exactly. Your sense of proportion gets totally thrown out the window. Everything feels like it is moving in this agonizing super slow motion.
And this isn't just some artsy interpretation by a film critic reading too much into things. The director, Lars von Trier, has been extremely open about this.
He really has been. He's very transparent.
He has explicitly stated, "I can only write about myself."
He is on the record saying that Melancholia is, more or less, a direct description of his own deep depression.
So when we sit down to watch this film, we aren't just watching a sci-fi drama about a rogue planet heading toward Earth.
No, we are looking at a highly detailed map of a depressive mind.
And it is a terrifying map. But it's also...
It's strangely validating.
Yes, the sources are very clear on this. If you have ever felt that specific warping of reality, seeing it projected on a screen can be an incredibly powerful...
It makes the invisible visible.
So let's get into the actual machinery. How does a movie actually simulate depression? We need to look at what the source calls the geometry of depression.
Which means we have to start where the narrative starts, the limo scene.
It is the perfect entry point. It totally sets the rules for the rest of the film.
For those of you who haven't seen it, or maybe it's just been a while, let's paint the picture.
Right, so the movie opens with this very stylistic, super slow-motion overture of the apocalypse, which we will definitely get.
But the actual story, the main narrative, begins on a wedding.
We meet Justine, played by Kirsten Dunst, and her new husband, Michael. They are new.
They've literally just gotten married, and they are trying to get to their wedding.
And this reception is being held at this massive, incredibly opulent estate. It's a castle.
Right, and they're traveling there in a stretch limo.
But not just a regular stretch limo, a very, very long stretch limousine. It's almost comically.
And they are driving on a road that is absolutely not built for a vehicle of that size.
It's this winding, narrow, dirt country road with these impossibly tight bends.
It's basically a tractor path. And this is exactly where we see that concept of skewed proportions immediately play out.
The car is just comically too large for the environment it's in.
It physically cannot make the turns. The driver is sweating. He's backing up, pulling forward, backing up again. It's agonizing to watch.
It really is painful. You're sitting there watching and thinking, who planned this? Why on earth did they rent this specific car for this specific road?
But eventually, they just have to give up. They abandon the car and walk the rest of the way to the castle.
But let's look at the expert analysis here from our sources. They argue this isn't just some quirky plot device to make the couple late.
No, it is a very deliberate metaphor for The vehicle of the self.
The vehicle of the self. Can you break that down for us?
Think about how you navigate the world every single day. You have your physical energy, your social skills, your mental state. That is your vehicle.
Okay, I follow you.
When you are depressed, that vehicle feels incredibly clumsy. It feels oversized and completely ill-suited for the road you were expected to drive on.
So the road is just normal life.
Exact. The road is normal life. It's a wedding, a party, a casual conversation with a friend, and your mental state is this lumbering, hopelessly heavy machine that just cannot make the turns that everyone else is making so easy.
Wow, that really resonates. It's that feeling of being too much or just too heavy for the delicate social situation you happen to be in.
You were just stuck.
And notice the result of all this. Because of this massive struggle with the limo, by the time they actually arrive at the castle for the party, half the night is...
The schedule is totally blown. They are incredibly late.
And the source highlights a very specific line here from the host of the party, John, who is Justine's brother-in-law.
He is furious.
He is. He looks at them and says, I won't even bother saying how late you are.
Now, this is where the source makes a really brilliant observation about the audience's perspective versus the character's perspective.
Because when John says that line, I remember feeling incredibly confused as a viewer.
Confused in what way?
Well, the movie just started. We are maybe 5 or 10 minutes into the narrative. As a viewer, I don't feel like I've been waiting for hours. I just sat down with my popcorn.
Right.
But the character, they are exhausted. They are acting like they've been dragged through a war to get there.
And that disconnect is entirely intent. The source calls it a clash between movie time and depressive.
Okay, so movie time is what we, the audience, are experiencing.
Exactly. We're at the beginning, everything feels fresh to us, but the characters are already inhabiting depressive.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning that in depressive time, you are already late, you're already exhausted before you even walk through the door, you feel like you have already ruined things before they even really began.
That is such a heavy, suffocating feeling. It creates this immediate, overwhelming sense of guilt.
It does. You are watching Justine apologize profusely, and even though you haven't seen her do anything wrong yet, you feel the absolute weight of her failure.
It really hints at this weird, almost dreamlike temporal quality that pervades the entire wedding reception.
The timeline of the movie starts following emotional logic rather than actual clock.
Right. In the real world, if you are 2 hours late, you apologize, people get over it, and you move on with the night.
But in the world of Melancholia, that lateness hangs over the entire night like a toxic cloud. It is a debt that simply cannot be paid back no matter what they do.
And it completely sets the stage for everything that follows. The party just feels like it goes on forever.
It really does.
And speaking of the party, absolutely have to talk about the relay center of it all, Justine and Michael.
The supposedly happy couple.
Right. Reading through the source material, this was a huge realization for me. When I first watched the film years ago, I thought the absolute lack of chemistry between them was maybe a flaw in the acting.
Or a bad casting choice.
Yeah. I thought, why are these two together? But the source argues that this disconnect is 100% intentional.
It is absolutely by design. It is jarring. You have two very attractive, very talented actors on screen, but there is this strange, unnerving lack of intimacy between them.
Honestly, it seems like they don't even know each other at all.
They don't seem to share a common language. The source points out these specific shots where Michael is supposed to represent this beacon of normalcy.
He's smiling, he's giving toasts, he's trying so incredibly hard to play the role of the happy groom.
But there are these moments where the camera catches him just staring off blankly. The source describes him as looking like a dead puppet.
A dead puppet. That is such a brutal description for a newlywed husband on his wedding night.
It is brutal. But you have to look at it through Justine's eyes. Remember the premise here. This film is a simulation of her warped reality.
Right.
To a deeply depressed mind, the normal people, the ones who are happy, who are effortlessly following the standard script of life, they can seem uncanny. They seem entirely unreachable.
Because they are operating in a completely different dimension of reality.
Yeah, precisely. Michael is constantly trying to reach her with these standard, grand, romantic gestures.
Like when he gives her an apple orchard as a wedding gift.
Right. He talks about their future together. But to Justine, who's currently sliding into this deep, inescapable gravitational well of depression, those gestures mean absolutely nothing.
He is unrecognizable to her.
He seems totally, completely unaware of the actual severity of her condition.
It creates this profound tragedy where he is standing right next to her, physically holding her hand, but he might as well be on another planet.
Which, ironically, is a major theme we will definitely get to in the second half.
Yes, we will. And the source points out another structural narrative detail that really reinforces this profound isolation. We get absolutely no backstory for this couple.
None whatsoever.
Think about a typical romantic drama or a rom-com. The very first thing the movie usually does is establish why these two people love each other.
You see the meet cute, you hear the funny story of their first date.
You get the context that makes you root for them. But in Melancholia, we just drop right in on the wedding day, and we know absolutely nothing about it.
We don't know how they met. We don't know how long they've been dating.
We don't even really know if they genuinely like each other.
Exactly. And the source says this is a brilliant structural choice by von Trier.
Why does he intentionally hide their history from us?
Because depression profoundly isolates you in the present. The source argues that for Justine, the past literally doesn't matter anymore.
The happy memory gone.
They're gone. The context is totally evaporated. There is only the warped, painful reality of the right now.
That is terrifying when you think about it. It's like the depression has completely erased the entire history of their relationship.
It leaves just these two strangers dressed up in wedding clothes, performing a social ritual that has lost all its meaning.
It strips away the entire narrative of us. There is no us anymore. There is just me stuck alone in this dark hole and you standing up there looking like a dead pup. The isolation is total.
And that feeling of isolation gets amplified even more by the way the wedding reception itself is structurally laid out.
The source uses a phrase for this that I just really love. They call it the architecture of disorientation.
It is a great phrase.
It does.
And it perfectly describes the physical and temporal space of that party.
The entire first half of the film is just this one reception. It goes on for a very long time, but it has this weird, stuttering, broken rhythm.
It alternates between the party, which implies continuous flowing time, and Justine just constantly leaving.
The exits, yes. This is a crucial behavior pattern to look at.
She just walks away in the middle of dinner. In the middle of speeches meant for her.
She rides a golf cart out across the dark grounds in her giant wedding dress. She goes upstairs and takes a nap on her parents' bed. She gets into a bathtub.
The bath scene is so iconic. She is languishing in a bathtub, totally checked out, while hundreds of her guests are downstairs waiting for the traditional cake cutting.
In a realistic film, or, in real life, if the bride disappears for an hour to take a bath, the party would completely stop.
Immediately, people would panic.
Right. People would be looking for her. The music would shut off. But here, no matter how many times she leaves or for how long, when she finally comes back, the party is always still there.
It is always still happening. It never stops.
It creates this total dream logic. It's like one of those nightmares where you try to run away, but you open a door and you were just back in the exact same room you started in.
It feels like she is trying to escape the movie itself, but the movie just will not.
And that really reinforces the terrible stasis of depression. You can check out mentally, you can completely dissociate, you can hide in the bathroom and just stare blankly at the wall for an hour.
But the demand of the world, party, the social obligations, your job, your family, they are still there. They're waiting for you to perform. It is absolutely relentless.
It's that crushing feeling of, I can't do this, but the world just keeps shouting, you must do this.
And the film actually uses editing technique to make this feeling visceral for the audience. The source brings up the La Bamba scene, which is just a perfect example of how the movie forces you physically into Justine's head.
This is a detail that the film critic Marta Figlarovich pointed out in the sources, and it is so smart. It's the scene of the newlyweds' first dance.
Let's picture the scene for the list. The song La Bamba starts playing. It's a classic, upbeat, very recognizable party.
Everyone knows it. Richie Valens. It's got a very driving, continuous...
Right. And if you just listen to the audio track of the film during this scene, the song plays continuously. There are no edits in the sound. It flows perfectly from start to finish.
It anchors your ears in real time. Your ears are telling your brain this is one continuous, unbroken event.
But the visuals are a totally different story. It's a disjointed montage. We see Justine dancing with Michael. Cut. Now she's dancing with her sister Claire. Cut. Now she's dancing with someone else entirely. Cut. She's spinning away alone.
The visual time is jumping forward in these jagged chunks.
But the music is not jumping at all.
The visual time is heavily fractured, but the audio time is perfectly continuous.
That is so incredibly unsettling. I remember watching that scene and feeling almost dizzy, like I couldn't get my footing in the narrative.
It creates a huge cognitive dissonance. Your senses are actively disagreeing with each other. Your ears say flow, your eyes say jump.
This is exactly the unsettling feeling of subjectivity the source is talking about. You are literally trapped inside Justine's fractured headspace.
You are experiencing the disorientation of trying to hold a smile together while your internal mind is skipping beats and losing time.
It's the distinct feeling of being disconnected from the normal flow of events. You are physically there, but mentally you are completely untethered.
It's like the director is desperately trying to lock everything in place with the constant music, trying to force a normal structure, but the visuals are rebelling against it. The reality is physically shattering on screen.
And that leads right into a much broader theme in the film that the source heavily emphasized: the total failure of measurement.
The failure of measurement. What exactly do they mean by that?
It's the inability to measure reality correct. The film is deeply obsessed with showing us that our normal tools for understanding the world, like math, science, time, logic, they simply do not work in this depressed state.
Oh, this makes me think of the bean counting scene.
The bean counting is the absolute prime example of this.
So there's this weird wedding game happening in the background. It's a tradition, I guess, at this estate. The guests have to guess the exact number of beans in a large glass jar.
Right. And pay attention to the numbers people are guessing. They're completely absurd.
Someone guesses 2,006,000.
Which is physically, mathematically impossible for a jar of that size. It's a tabletop jar, not an Olympic swimming pool.
But no one in the movie seems to flag that guess as insane.
It's treated as a perfectly valid, normal guess. And later in the film, this theme scales up massively. When the characters are trying to track the actual rogue planet, Melancholia, the scientific tools fail them again.
The scientists predict a specific, safe trajectory. They say the planet will pass by Earth. They use their high-tech instruments. They use their complex math.
And they are wrong.
They are dead wrong. The math lies to them.
The source has this truly great line summarizing the film's universe. It says, everything that's handled burns, creases, or shatters.
It feels like in this specific world, you cannot trust a ruler. You cannot trust a clock.
It is a world entirely untethered. Standard metrics of reality just do not apply here. And think about what that says about severe clinical depression.
What does it say to you?
It says that you cannot measure your internal feelings against external reality because your measuring stick is fundamentally broken.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
You cannot use logic to just talk yourself out of a deep depression. You can't look at a piece of paper and say, well, statistically, my life is good. I have a job, I have a spouse, so I shouldn't be sad.
The math of your life doesn't work out. The internal gravity of the sadness, way too strong to be countered by logic.
Exactly. So we have this internal world that is completely falling apart. The measurements are wrong. The time is warped. The relationships are dead puppets.
But, and this is a really big but, the film is also incredibly, almost overwhelmingly obsessed with beauty.
It is a genuinely gorgeous movie to look at.
Stunning visual. And the source points out that von Trier specifically hid a bunch of classical art history references.
These aren't just pretty pictures for the sake of being pretty. The source calls them artistic ancestry.
Artistic ancestry. That's a key concept to unpack. He is providing a historical lineage for this terrible feeling. He's essentially saying, I am not the first person in human history to feel this specific way.
Let's look at the Ophelia reference. This is one of the most striking, famous images in the entire movie. It's right there in the opening slow-motion montage, and later we see echoes of it in the narrative.
It's the shot of Justine floating on her back in the stream, wearing her heavy wedding dress, clutching a bouquet of...
It looks exactly, almost stroke for stroke,
Yeah.
like the famous painting by John Everett Millais.
Right, the painting titled Ophelia.
And we have to ask the listener, who is Ophelia?
She is the tragic character from Shakespeare's...
And the source specifically note, she is perhaps the most famous depressive in all of Western literature. She goes mad from grief and eventually drowns herself in a river.
So by recreating that exact painted image, by literally painting his character Justine into that historical frame, von Trier is firmly connecting her to this long, deep history of tragic figures.
He is saying to the audience, this isn't just me whining. This is an ancient archetype. It elevates the depression.
It turns it from just a modern chemical imbalance into a grand mythic state of...
It gives the suffering real weight and historical dignity.
And then there is the reference to the painter Peter Bruegel, specifically his painting, Hunters in the Snow.
We actually see that physical painting on screen in the movie, don't we? It's in the library of the castle.
It is. The camera lingers on it deliberately. The painting depicts these winter hunters returning to their small village with their dog. They are trudging heavily through the deep snow. Their heads are bowed down.
And the most important detail of that painting.
They are completely empty-handed. They went out into the harsh world to hunt, to provide, and they totally failed.
It is a very bleak, freezing cold image of absolute exhaustion and failure. It perfectly captures that specific feeling of returning home defeated by the world.
But the source points out an even deeper cinematic connection there too, because that specific Bruegel painting appeared in another incredibly famous sci-fi movie about the depth of the human soul.
Right, Solaris, the 1972 film directed by Andrei Tarkovsky.
Now, this might seem like a deep cut for casual moviegoers, but it's vastly important for our deep dive. Von Trier is a massive vocal fan of Tarkovsky.
He practically worships the guy. And Solaris is also a film about the murky depths of the human psyche, set against an isolating sci-fi space backdrop.
In Solaris, that Bruegel painting is used to remind the isolated character Earth of fragile humanity and of the inherent sadness of life.
So by putting it directly into Melancholia, von Trier is nodding respectfully to Tarkovsky. He's building a thematic bridge between the two.
And the connection to Tarkovsky actually goes even deeper than just a visual painting. The source mentions that Tarkovsky used music in a very specific structural way, and von Trier copies it almost exactly.
Yes, the refrain technique.
The refrain technique. Walk us through that.
In Solaris, Tarkovsky used a piece of classical music by choral prelude, and he played it repeatedly throughout the film. It becomes a looping motif.
And in Melancholia, von Trier used a sweeping prelude to Richard Wagner's opera, Tristan and Isolde.
That music is absolutely relentless in this movie. It swells, it builds to a massive crescendo, and just when you finally think it's over and you can breathe, it comes rushing back.
And according to the source, that's exactly the point of the text. Tarkovsky argued that a musical refrain brings us back to our first experience of entering that poetic world, but it constantly makes it immediate and renews it.
Right.
Can you explain that renewal aspect a bit more? How does repeating a song renew its meaning?
Well, think about how it functions in the film. The very first time you hear the Wagner piece, it's during the opening sequence. You immediately associate it with the apocalypse. Right. You're watching a planet crash into Earth in slow motion. It is huge, terrifying, and awe-inspiring.
Right, so the music means destruction.
But then later in the film, you hear the exact same piece when Justine is standing outside, quietly looking up at the glowing moon. Now suddenly the music carries the terrifying weight of the apocalypse, but it also carries the quiet beauty of the night sky.
It's layering the emotions.
Exactly. And then you hear it again at the disastrous wedding reception. Now it carries the apocalypse, the moon, and the crushing sadness of her failed marriage.
It accumulates meaning with every single play. It just gets heavier and heavier for the...
It acts exactly like a snowball rolling down a mountain. By the end of the film, simply hearing those first few notes of that Wagner piece triggers a massive emotional response in your brain because it is now carrying 2 full hours of accumulated trauma and beauty.
And the director's choice of Wagner is highly specific too. Tristan and Isolde. That is a deeply romantic, tragic opera.
It's basically the ultimate opera of love and death. The music itself is famous in music theory for almost never resolved. It constantly builds tension and deep longing, but intentionally delays the satisfying resolution until the very end.
Which fits the emotional landscape of the movie perfectly. It is a constant mix of extreme beauty, unfulfilled desire, and impending...
The source actually calls it a mix of beauty and a glowing blue planet of destruction. It is highly romantic, but strictly in a we're all gonna die right now kind of way.
We also have brief references to another film in the sources, Alain Resnais's Last Year at Marienbad.
Oh yes, another major classic art film.
The source mentions it to highlight the film's structure. It's another movie where the concept of time makes abstract.
Right. Marienbad is famous for its totally dreamlike, disjointed narrative structure, where past, present, and future completely blur together in this grand hotel.
So by referencing all these things, von Trier is basically building a giant artistic collage. He is saying to us, my personal depression constructed from historical part, Ophelia's tragic madness, Bruegel's winter exhaust, Tarkovsky's spiritual weight, Wagner's romantic doom, and Resnais's...
He surrounds his characters with these heavy works of art because, as the source eloquently suggests, our memories of a film are built on the works of art that inform and precede it.
It gives the depression a rich historical text. It elevates it. It's not just a guy saying, I'm sad today. It's a statement saying, I am part of grand, painful, tragic, human...
It totally dignifies the suffering.
Exactly. It turns raw, ugly suffering high.
Okay, so we have firmly established the depression. We've established the warped, disjointed reality of the first half. We've looked at the dense art history and set.
But then comes the entire second half of the film. The source calls this the reversal.
And this is the major pivot point of the story. This is where the film suddenly moves from being an intimate psychological family drama to a literal sci-fi apocalypse.
Because up until this point, the idea of the end of the world has mostly just been a neat metaphor for Justine's internal state of mind.
But now, in the second half, the rogue blue planet, Melancholia, is actually physically going to hit Earth. It is not a metaphor anymore. It is undeniably happening.
It is an extraordinary situation, literally the worst possible case scenario for...
And this is exactly where the internal character dynamics completely flip upside down.
Throughout the entire first half of the movie, Justine was an absolute mess. She couldn't bathe herself. She couldn't eat her favorite food because she said it tasted like ashes. She was practically catatonic. She literally needed help just to lift her leg over the edge of the bathtub.
And her sister, Claire, was the rock of the family. Claire was the strict organizer. Claire was the one holding the entire event together, making all the rational plans, counting the minutes on the schedule. Claire was the dictionary definition of sane and functional.
But as the rogue planet gets closer and closer in the sky and the destruction of Earth becomes absolutely certain, look at what happens.
Claire begins to completely unravel. She completely loses it. She panics. She tries to pack a bag and flee with her child, which, if you think about it, is totally irrational because there is literally nowhere to go. It is a planet-killing event. You cannot pack the car and drive away from a planet hitting your planet.
But she is just utterly terrified. Her rational mind.
But Justine
calmly takes a bath. She eats a normal meal. She goes outside in the middle of the night and looks up at the massive, terrifying planet, totally naked, literally bathing in its blue light. She is perfectly calm.
She is strangely, almost beautifully empowered by the doom.
There is that incredibly chilling line she delivers to her sister. She looks at Claire, who is sobbing, and she just calmly says, "The Earth is evil. We don't need..."
It is such a dark, nihilistic sentiment, but she says it with such intense clarity, such absolute, unshakable authority.
And this is the absolute crux of the source material's argument. The source calls this concept the film catching the...
That is a really powerful, evocative way to phrase it. The film catching the...
What exactly does that mean in this context?
It means that when the actual world outside becomes a literal nightmare, when external reality actually becomes as hopeless and doomed as internal depression, the depressed person is finally truly at home.
Because she has already been living in the end of the world for years inside her own head.
Exactly. Her internal reality, that dark place where time has stopped, where all hope is gone, where utter doom is always inevitable, has finally been perfectly matched by external reality.
The outside world finally caught up to her inside world.
She doesn't have to exhaust herself pretending to be happy anymore. She doesn't have to struggle to fit into the normal, upbeat rhythm of life, because the normal rhythm has entirely stopped for everyone. The pressure to perform normalcy is completely off.
So for this supposedly sane person, Claire, the apocalypse is a horrifying deviation from the norm. It is pure chaos. It is a massive violation of the rules she life on.
Right. Claire always expects a future. She expects survival and continuity. When that expectation is violently taken away, her mind just shatters.
But for Justine, the end of all existence is just another.
It brings her into perfect equilibrium. The source argues that the severely depressed mind is practically the only mind equipped to handle the literal end of all things, because it has already mourned the loss of everything anyway.
Justine has already deeply mourned the world. She has already fully accepted that existence is evil and complete.
So when the planet actually ends, she is the only person who can stand up straight and look it right in the eye without...
That is such a profound, challenging idea. It completely flips the societal script on who is actually sick and who is actually well.
It forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. Is depression solely a sickness? Or is it, in some strange circumstances, just a different, perhaps more realistic kind of awareness?
Because in the face of total catastrophe, blind optimism, mass
optimism gets you killed, or at the very least, it makes you panic and suffer more. Melancholy, in this extreme scenario, is a vital survival skill, or at least an emotional coping skill.
It heavily suggests that the entire sane world is just built on fragile illusion. We all just pretend things will last forever so we can get through today. We pretend our daily schedules actually matter. We pretend the giant limo will somehow fit on the tiny dirt road.
But the depressive knows it won't. The depressive inherently knows the road is too narrow and it's all going to crash. And when the illusion finally breaks for everyone else, the depressive is the only one left emotionally standing.
Which brings us perfectly to the outro and the big, overarching takeaway from our deep dive. The source boldly argues that traditional science and medicine have largely come up short in their apprehension of mental illness.
It's a very bold claim to make, but think about it practically. You can open the DSM-5 and list the clinical symptoms of depression.
Loss of appetite, chronic fatigue, anhedonia.
It reads exactly like a sterile checklist for a car repair manual.
Right. But does reading that bulleted list make you actually feel what it's like to be in that dark hole?
Does it explain to a loved one why a bride would just walk out of her own lavish wedding to take a nap?
Does it explain why someone would stare at a giant rogue planet about to crush them and feel nothing but profound calm?
Not at all. Medicine diagnoses it, but it doesn't communicate the soul of it.
But Melancholia makes you feel it in your bone. It aggressively uses the camera, the disjointed editing, the relentless sound, and the warped narrative structure to physically simulate the experience.
It forcibly drags the audience into the incredibly heavy gravity of the condition.
The source material leaves us with this thought. We must look to art for insights and solidarity regarding living a life out of
proportion. That is the perfect summary of what Melancholia so brilliantly captures.
It is the terrifying feeling that your core identity has become completely untethered from reality, that time has slowed down to an agonizing stance, and that your physical body feels like it weighs a literal ton.
And by putting that on screen, it creates solidarity. If you have ever felt that awful way and you watch this movie, you suddenly realize, oh, I am not entirely. Someone else sees this. Lars von Trier sees exactly what I see.
And even if the film is highly polarizing, and it definitely is, some people hate the bleak ending, some people find the pacing way too slow, its artistic beauty is simply undeniable.
It dignifies the immense suffering. It doesn't just clinically treat depression as a broken machine that needs to be fixed with a pill. It treats it as a profound state of being that has its own massive gravity, its own dark, undeniable logic.
It validates the experience for the people living it.
It really does.
Yeah.
It validates the warped reality as a reality that is functionally true for the person trapped inside it. And that level of deep validation is something a medical diagnosis alone just cannot always.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we are left with a pretty provocative thought one. We talk at length about the reversal, how Justine actually becomes the strong, capable one when the world literally ends.
Right, the concept of the melancholic hero.
So here is the final question I want to leave you with today. If depression is essentially defined as a severe warping of reality, what happens to us when external reality itself actually becomes?
Because we live in some pretty crazy times, right?
To say the very least, we have dealt with global pandemics. We have the looming existential threat of climate change. We have constant political instability that often feels totally surreal.
It often feels like the world we know is just coming apart at the seam. It feels like the world's becoming more unstable, more unpredictable, more untethered by the day.
Exactly. So in a world that is increasingly chaotic and terrifying, does the historically sane, blindly optimistic mind start to violently crack under the pressure?
Does the person who relies entirely on orderly schedules and the illusion of normalcy suddenly find themselves completely unable to cope with the chaos?
And on the flip side, does the depressed, highly cynical mind finally find its footing in that chaos?
Are we perhaps moving into an era where the melancholics among us are actually the ones who can see reality the most clearly?
Are they the ones who will be able to navigate the end of the world simply because they have been emotionally practicing for it their entire lives?
That is a question that is definitely going to keep me up tonight.
Me too. But honestly, that is exactly what a deep dive is for. To take a piece of art, peel back all the complex layers, and find the raw philosophy hiding. Thank you so much for listening and exploring this. Catch you on the